On a frost-laden morning at Balmoral Estate, Princess Anne delivered words that would reshape everything. "You may fool the press," she said. "You may fool the public, but you don't fool the crown. Not forever." Those words, they landed like a verdict. Prince Harry had returned to London with hope. He believed a legal victory against the Daily Mail might open doors, might rebuild bridges. But the Wales had other plans. One day before his arrival, they boarded a royal jet to Scotland. The message was unmistakable. There would be no meeting, no reconciliation, no second chances. Throughout the trial, Meghan remained absent, not supporting, not present. Instead, she was photographed at a wellness summit in Palo Alto, no wedding ring, surrounded by venture capitalists and Gulf-linked financiers. The contrast was devastating. Harry had given everything for a vision of freedom, but by late 2025, that freedom had become a prison. He appeared at events as a prop beside Meghan, silent, diminished, a man watching his own life from the outside. By August 2025, Harry filed for divorce. But when a photo of Lilibet arrived, sick in a hospital gown, he withdrew the motion. He couldn't abandon his children, even if it meant staying in a marriage that was already dead. The mediation failed. The Netflix deals collapsed. Archwell faced audits. And Harry, he was left with nothing. No titles, no platform, no peace. Then came January 23rd. Harry made an announcement that shocked everyone. He was renouncing his California residency, walking away from everything, cutting ties to a life he now called synthetic. By month's end, he had moved to Hampshire, a modest home, alone, no security, no entourage, just a handwritten note left for a former staff member. "I lost myself, but I found a reason to start again, even if I'm alone." Behind palace walls, the silence was deafening. No statement from William, no acknowledgement from Catherine, just stillness. But Princess Anne, she stepped forward once more. At a youth equestrian center in Perth, a reporter pressed her about Harry's renunciation. Anne paused. Her eyes were cold, calculated. She had raised on duty, not emotion. "We've all known a shepherd boy like that," she said quietly. "And sadly, sometimes when the wolf finally comes, there's no one left to listen." She didn't name him. She didn't have to. What few knew was that Anne had been the only one willing to help. Behind closed doors, she had explored options, limited visitation arrangements, supervised reunions on Crown Estate grounds, perhaps in rural Gloucester, perhaps at Balmoral's Western Lodge. But she made one thing clear to Harry's legal team. Our help ends where the institution begins. We protect the family name, not individual regret. Then came January 22nd, Geneva. Harry appeared at a media ethics forum without handlers, without security, just a man in a black coat, holding a single page of handwritten notes. His hands were shaking. "I want to say this clearly," he began. "To my father, to my brother, to the institution I once ran from, I was wrong about many things. I was manipulated about others. But I still take responsibility. And I am sorry." The video went viral in minutes. But what followed shattered everything. Harry revealed documents, audio files, evidence that Meghan had signed a secret commercial agreement with a New York media firm. Without his consent, without his knowledge. They had been selling stories about the royal family, selling private conversations, monetizing their intimate moments. The recordings were alleged to capture Meghan discussing Catherine, discussing Charles, discussing the entire inner workings of the monarchy, recorded between 2020 and 2022, without permission, without consent. One clip. Harry's voice could be heard in the background, weary, broken. "Maybe we should stop talking like this while the kids are home." Not angry, just exhausted. Behind palace walls, the institutional machinery moved with calculated precision. No emotional outbursts, no defensive statements, no desperate denials. Just silence. Prince William received briefings from his advisors. Catherine reviewed the allegations in private. King Charles, now transitioning more duties to his son, maintained the posture of a man who had already made his decision. There would be no rescue, no intervention, no last-minute royal clemency. But Princess Anne, she was different. She had always been different. At a youth equestrian center in Perth, during a Commonwealth Armed Services Roundtable event, a reporter pressed her directly. The question was pointed, impossible to dodge. Did Prince Harry have any pathway back to the royal fold? Any possibility of reconciliation? Any chance at institutional forgiveness? Anne paused, not because she was searching for words, but because she was deciding how much truth to reveal. Her eyes were cold, measured, the eyes of someone raised on duty rather than sentiment, raised on the understanding that the crown exists above individual desire, above personal redemption, above the fleeting emotions of family members who choose to abandon their posts. "We've all known a shepherd boy like that," she said quietly. Her voice carried the weight of institutional authority. The one who cried wolf so many times that when the real danger finally arrived, there was no one left to listen. She paused. Let the metaphor settle. And sadly, sometimes when the wolf finally comes, there's no one left to listen. Because trust, once broken, doesn't simply repair itself with time or apology or convenient reappearance. It requires something deeper, something the institution cannot afford to give. She didn't name him. She didn't need to. What the public didn't know was that Anne had been, in private moments, the only senior royal willing to extend assistance. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but logistical help. In late 2025, she had met with legal advisors to explore non-public arrangements, options that might allow Harry safe passage back to British soil, limited child visitation frameworks, supervised reunions on Crown Estate grounds, perhaps in rural Gloucester, perhaps at Balmoral's Western Lodge, somewhere quiet, somewhere away from the machinery of media scrutiny. But she made one thing abundantly clear to Harry's legal representatives. Our help ends precisely where the institution begins. We can offer privacy, we can offer discretion, but we cannot offer rehabilitation. We protect the family name, not individual regret, and the distinction is everything. Those words, they landed like a closing door. Then came January 22nd, Geneva. The city was gray, the winter air sharp and unforgiving. At a small media ethics forum hosted by a private NGO investigating information abuse and corporate malfeasance, something unexpected happened. Prince Harry appeared. Not announced, not choreographed, not managed through his representatives or filtered through palace communications teams. He simply arrived. He wore a simple black coat, no security detail visible, no entourage, no handlers controlling the narrative or managing optics, just a man carrying a single page of handwritten notes, approaching a microphone with trembling hands. The room fell silent. "I want to say this clearly," he began. His voice was steady, but barely. "To my father, to my brother, to the institution I once ran from with such conviction, I was wrong about many things. I was manipulated about others, but I still take responsibility. And I am deeply sorry." The video clip lasted 3 minutes and 14 seconds. It went viral in under 60 minutes. But what followed, what came after those opening words, shattered the remaining fragments of sympathy the public might have retained. Harry stepped away from the podium. He held up documents, printed pages, evidence. "An anonymous whistleblower," he explained, "sent me materials in early January, documents suggesting that Meghan had signed a commercial licensing agreement with a New York-based media firm called Fremont Media. This agreement was executed in October 2024. Without my knowledge, without my consent, without my signature." He began reading from the contract itself. "The agreement grants Fremont Media rights to narrative-based dramatizations of what they call my wife's royal experiences, behind-the-scenes psychological insights about life inside the royal family, personal reflections sourced from private conversations, journals, interactions, all to be repackaged into books, streaming content, branded empowerment modules." His voice cracked slightly. "I was not listed as co-signatory. In no prior conversation had she disclosed this arrangement to me. I discovered it through an anonymous email." Then came the audio files. 3 separate recordings, allegedly captured within the Sussex estate between 2020 and 2022, allegedly without consent, without knowledge, Without permission, they captured Meghan in casual conversation, sometimes with Harry in the room, sometimes without. The excerpts circulated widely contained references to Catherine, to Charles, to the institutional inner workings of the monarchy itself. One recording, Harry's voice could be heard in the background, not angry, not accusatory, just profoundly weary. "Maybe we should stop talking like this while the kids are home," he said quietly. "It's not safe. Not a demand. Not a confrontation. Just the exhausted plea of a man watching the woman he loved weaponize their intimate moments for commercial gain." Following the Geneva revelations, the media descended upon Kensington Palace with predatory intensity. Reporters camped outside the gates. Photographers positioned themselves along the perimeter. Questions were shouted at every opportunity. Prince William and Princess Catherine, they offered nothing. No defensive statement, no clarification, no attempt to contextualize or minimize the allegations. The palace communications team issued a single sentence: "The Prince and Princess of Wales will not be commenting on private matters." But their silence spoke volumes. The very next day, William appeared at a children's hospital in Manchester. He moved through the corridors with practiced ease. He spoke with young patients. He smiled for the cameras. Catherine, dressed in a deep blue coat of impeccable tailoring, held newborn babies and engaged warmly with nursing staff. Neither of them acknowledged the questions shouted from reporters. Neither of them blinked when Harry's name was mentioned. The message was crystalline: you do not exist in our institutional reality anymore. Behind the palace gates, however, a different conversation was occurring. Senior advisors to William briefed him extensively on the legal implications, the potential constitutional ramifications, the broader questions about royal security protocols, and who possessed access to sensitive family discussions. The conversations were clinical, strategic, devoid of the sentiment one might expect when discussing a brother's betrayal. One senior aide, speaking anonymously to a trusted journalist, delivered a statement that would become the defining characterization of the moment. The Geneva speech was a burn notice. William is done. No more bridges. No more meetings. No more consideration. He views Harry as compromised beyond institutional repair. Catherine, meanwhile, approached the situation with characteristic pragmatism. She did not rage. She did not demand retribution. Instead, she urged William toward absolute restraint, toward public dignity, toward the understanding that the institution's power lies not in reactive emotion, but in sustained, glacial indifference. "Let him exist outside," she reportedly told William. "Don't acknowledge the existence you no longer recognize." It was perhaps the cruelest mercy the Crown could offer. Harry, in his Hampshire retreat, received no phone calls, no messages of support, no indication that reconciliation remained possible under any circumstance. The institutional door had closed with finality. His residence was modest, a privately leased property in a quiet village, no security details visible, no entourage. The staff had been dismissed or reduced to minimal levels. The Range Rover was gone. The chef no longer prepared meals. The elaborate infrastructure of privilege had been systematically dismantled. He occupied himself with solitary pursuits. He walked the grounds. He wrote. Sources close to him suggested he had begun working on a manuscript, not for publication, not for commercial gain, but for his children, a private documentation of his journey, a story that began with a boy in a palace and ended somewhere quieter, somewhere more honest. The loneliness was reportedly profound. A former military colleague from his army days described Harry's emotional state during a confidential conversation. He told me he cannot sleep without hearing Lilibet's laughter, but simultaneously he's terrified that remaining near Meghan means the slow dissolution of his own sense of self. He's trapped between two forms of death. One involves losing his children, the other involves losing his soul. It was a paralyzing paradox with no satisfactory resolution. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle demonstrated remarkable strategic acuity. On the exact same day that coverage of Harry's Geneva revelations dominated global media cycles, she launched a new platform, a global initiative. She called it Arc Legacy. The stated purpose was supporting resilience, equity, and empowered storytelling within female leadership networks. The launch video was visually stunning. She walked through a rose garden dressed entirely in white, barefoot, smiling. The cinematography was professional, the lighting immaculate, the narrative carefully constructed. "Sometimes we have to leave behind the narrative others gave us," her voice narrated, "and write the one we were always meant to live. This is not a reinvention. It's a restoration." The message was unmistakable. She was repositioning herself, shedding the Sussex identity, moving beyond the marriage, transcending the monarchy entirely. Her social media biography was surgically updated. Founder, mother, builder, voice. Harry was absent from every element of this new narrative. The children, Archie and Lilibet, remained under Meghan's primary physical custody. They continued their schooling in a private Montessori program in Montecito. Harry, per the terms of their mediated custody arrangement, possessed remote access through weekly supervised video calls. He was permitted quarterly in-person visits, but only within neutral territories, only under conditions approved by both parties, only under circumstances that protected Meghan's control of the narrative. According to a mutual friend, Harry had recently declined an offered visit in Los Angeles. His explanation was devastating in its simplicity. "I won't see them in front of their lenses, not again." The conflict was irreconcilable. His love for his children existed in direct opposition to the media architecture that had been constructed around them. He could not access his own children without simultaneously participating in the commodification of their lives, without enabling the very system that had destroyed him. Following the Geneva revelations, institutional responses crystallized with remarkable speed and calculated precision. The media descended upon Kensington Palace with the intensity of a coordinated assault. Reporters positioned themselves along the perimeter fencing. Camera crews established semi-permanent stations. Questions were shouted at every conceivable opportunity, each one more pointed than the last. Prince William and Princess Catherine maintained what palace communications would later describe as strategic silence. No defensive statement was issued, no clarification was offered, no attempt was made to contextualize or minimize the allegations against Meghan. The Palace Communications Office, through its official channels, released a single measured sentence. "The Prince and Princess of Wales will not be commenting on private matters at this time." But the silence itself was a form of communication. It conveyed volumes about institutional abandonment, about the finality of severed bonds, about the Crown's fundamental unwillingness to extend further consideration to a member who had repeatedly violated the unspoken codes of discretion upon which the entire institution depended. The very next day, William appeared at a children's hospital in Manchester. He moved through the corridors with the practiced ease of someone born to this role. He spoke with young patients about their treatments and their dreams. He engaged with their families. He smiled for the assembled photographers with the kind of warmth that seemed genuine, because decades of training had made it genuinely indistinguishable from authentic emotion. Catherine, dressed in a coat of impeccable tailoring, deep blue velvet with ivory trim, held newborn infants in her arms. She spoke warmly with nursing staff about their work. She asked detailed questions about patient care protocols. She demonstrated the kind of engaged presence that had become her signature, the carefully cultivated image of a future queen who genuinely cared about the well-being of ordinary people. Neither of them acknowledged the questions that were shouted from reporters positioned along the hospital corridors. Neither of them blinked when Harry's name was invoked. Neither of them demonstrated even the slightest flicker of emotional response when journalists referenced the Geneva speech or the alleged recordings or the commercial agreement that had been exposed. The institutional message was unmistakable and glacially clear. You do not exist within our reality anymore. Behind the palace gates, however, a more nuanced conversation was occurring within the tightly restricted circles of senior advisors and constitutional specialists. Prince William received extensive briefings from his team regarding the legal implications of Harry's revelations. Constitutional lawyers outlined potential precedents. Security specialists discussed the vulnerability of royal communications given that allegedly confidential conversations had been recorded and subsequently commercialized. Senior aides debated the broader institutional questions about access to sensitive family discussions and the mechanisms by which such access could be exploited. The conversations were clinical, strategic, almost entirely devoid of the emotional resonance one might expect when discussing a brother's profound betrayal and the weaponization of intimate family moments. One senior palace aide, speaking to a trusted journalist on condition of strict anonymity, delivered a characterization that would become the defining institutional assessment of the moment. The Geneva speech was effectively a burn notice. William has reached the absolute limit of institutional patience. No more bridges will be offered, no more meetings will be permitted, no more consideration will be extended. From the institution's perspective, Harry is compromised beyond any realistic pathway to repair. He has demonstrated that he will monetize private family information. He has shown that his judgment regarding his own marriage was fundamentally flawed. He has proven that he cannot be trusted with institutional secrets or family confidence. Therefore, the decision has been made to treat him as an external entity rather than as a family member. The words were harsh, but they reflected the genuine institutional assessment. Princess Catherine, notably, did not approach the situation with anger or demands for retribution. Instead, she counseled William towards something far more devastating: absolute restraint combined with sustained indifference. In a private conversation with her husband, she reportedly articulated a strategic philosophy that would become the foundation of the Crown's ongoing approach to Harry. Let him exist outside. Don't acknowledge. Don't respond. Don't defend. The institution's true power doesn't lie in reactive emotion or defensive statements. It lies in the simple ability to render someone irrelevant through the withdrawal of attention. He will spend the rest of his life trying to prove his relevance to an institution that has decided he no longer exists. It was perhaps the cruelest form of mercy the Crown could offer, not punishment, which would at least acknowledge his significance, but erasure. The systematic institutional decision to treat him as though he had never been important at all. Harry, in his Hampshire retreat, received no telephone calls from family members, no messages of support, no indication whatsoever that reconciliation remained possible under any conceivable circumstance. The institutional door had closed with absolute finality. His residence was modest in comparison to the sprawling California estates he had previously occupied, a privately leased property situated in a quiet village approximately 40 miles outside London. The location offered anonymity. The architectural style was understated. The grounds were sufficient but unremarkable. No security details were visible, no entourage maintained a perimeter. The elaborate infrastructure of royal privilege had been systematically dismantled. The chef who had prepared meals to exacting specifications no longer worked at the property. The household staff that had managed daily operations had been dismissed or reduced to minimal levels. The luxury Range Rover registered to the Archwell Trust had been returned to Jaguar facilities without any request for replacement vehicle procurement. What remained was essentially a shell, a quiet space in which a man could exist without the constant machinery of performance and image management. Harry occupied himself with solitary pursuits that reflected an internal reckoning of profound proportions. He walked the property grounds at irregular hours. He maintained a journal. He wrote extensively, though the contents remained private. Sources close to him suggested he had begun working on a manuscript of significant length, not intended for publication, not designed for commercial distribution, but rather created as a private documentation of his internal journey, a chronicle written specifically for his children, a story that began with a boy in a palace and ended somewhere quieter, somewhere more honest, somewhere closer to actual truth than the carefully managed narratives that had characterized his previous decades. The loneliness was reportedly profound and all-consuming. A former military colleague from Harry's Army service days, someone who had served alongside him in Afghanistan and maintained periodic contact despite the geographical distance, described Harry's emotional state during a confidential conversation that was subsequently leaked to sympathetic journalists. He told me during one late-night conversation that he cannot sleep without hearing Lilibet's laughter. He described lying awake listening to voice recordings of her laughing, playing, speaking her first words, but simultaneously, he's terrified that maintaining proximity to Meghan means the slow, incremental dissolution of his own sense of self, his own identity, his own capacity for authentic emotion. He's trapped between two impossible forms of death. One involves the permanent loss of his children. The other involves the gradual erasure of his own soul. There is no resolution that doesn't carry catastrophic consequence. It was a paralyzing paradox with no satisfactory or even survivable resolution. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle demonstrated remarkable strategic acuity and remarkable timing in her response to the institutional devastation surrounding Harry. On the exact same calendar day that coverage of Harry's Geneva revelations dominated global media cycles and trending topics across every major social platform, she orchestrated the launch of a new initiative, a global platform, an institutional framework designed to project her as a thought leader on resilience, equity, and empowered storytelling within elite female leadership networks. She called it ARC Legacy. The stated institutional purpose was supporting what she termed narrative restoration and authentic voice recovery within international communities of female business leaders, philanthropists, and cultural influencers. The launch video was visually accomplished and professionally executed. She walked through a meticulously designed rose garden dressed entirely in white linen, barefoot, her expression serene, her bearing conveying absolute certainty. The cinematography demonstrated the investment of significant professional resources. The lighting was immaculate. Every frame was composed with deliberate intention. The narrative was carefully constructed to communicate transformation and autonomous choice. Sometimes we have to leave behind the narrative others constructed for us, her voice narrated with practiced sincerity, and write the one we were always meant to live. This is not a reinvention, it's a restoration, a return to the authentic self that existed before institutional frameworks attempted to define and constrain it. The message embedded within this carefully crafted communication was unmistakable to those observing with analytical distance. She was systematically repositioning herself, shedding the Sussex identity that had become tainted by association with Harry's failures and public humiliation, moving deliberately beyond the marriage that had become a liability, transcending the monarchy entirely, and positioning herself as a post-royal figure of independent significance and intellectual authority. Her social media biography was surgically updated to reflect this repositioning. Founder, mother, builder, voice. Harry was conspicuously absent from every element of this new institutional narrative. His name was not mentioned. His image did not appear. His existence was effectively erased from her public projection of self. The children, Archie and Lilibet, remained under Meghan's primary physical custody and direct parental control. They continued their schooling within a private Montessori educational program situated in the Monte Sado area. Harry, per the terms of their mediated custody arrangement that had been negotiated through California family law protocols, possessed remote access to his children through carefully monitored weekly supervised video calls. He was permitted quarterly in-person visits to see his children in person, but only within neutral territories approved through legal consensus, only under conditions that protected Meghan's control of the narrative and the institutional framing of their relationship, only under circumstances that prevented Harry from establishing independent connection or building autonomous bonds with Archie and Lilibet. According to a mutual friend who maintained contact with both parties, Harry had recently declined an offered opportunity for an in-person visit scheduled to occur in Los Angeles. His explanation for this refusal was devastating in its clarity and painful in its honesty. "I won't see them in front of their lenses. Not again. I can't participate in turning my own children into content. I can't watch their childhood being monetized and dramatized for public consumption. The love I have for them is being weaponized against them, so I stay away. And they forget me, and eventually, perhaps that's mercy." The conflict was fundamentally irreconcilable. His biological love for his own children existed in direct and inescapable opposition to the elaborate media architecture that had been constructed around them. He could not access his own offspring without simultaneously participating in and enabling the commodification of their existence, without reinforcing the very system that had systematically destroyed him. In the quiet of his Hampshire home, Harry writes letters he will never send. The crown has moved forward without him. And somewhere in California, 2 children grow up knowing a father only through photographs and supervised video calls. The boy who ran from duty discovered too late that freedom without purpose is just another kind of prison.